My name's Lacey and I'm the software developer behind the AlphaSphere and its AlphaLive software. In this tutorial video, I'm going to show you how to use the AlphaSphere as a multi-channel MIDI instrument with PreSonus Studio One. I've also made videos for a number of other DAWs, so make sure you check out the ones that are relevant to the DAWs that you use. Also, please note that this is part 2 of the Using the AlphaSphere as a multi-channel MIDI instrument tutorial, so if you haven't done so yet, you may want to first check out part 1 of the tutorial, where I go over how to program the sphere to be a multi-channel MIDI instrument using its AlphaLive software. So in this video, I'm going to cover 3 main things within Studio One: how to connect multi-channel MIDI instruments, how to add new instrument tracks and assign individual MIDI channels to each, and finally give an example of how you can map MIDI CC controls to software parameters. So here I have Studio One version 2.5 running on Mac OS X. First we just need to create a new song. So to do that, click on the Create New Song button here and just select an empty song, give it any details you want and click OK. And now we essentially have an empty Studio One song. The AlphaSphere is plugged into the computer and I've got the AlphaLive application running. And I'm using the AlphaLive project that we created in part 1 of this tutorial, which essentially set different MIDI channels to the different rows of pads. So first, let's go over how to connect the AlphaSphere to Studio One and setting up its MIDI input. So what you need to do first is go to Studio One and Preferences if you're on Mac OS X, or if you're on Windows, you can find this Preferences option under the Options menu. So let's go to the Preferences. You want to select the External Devices tab at the top and then go to Add. Now this is where you add a new MIDI input device or MIDI input and output device to Studio One. So for the AlphaSphere, we want to click New Keyboard. For the manufacturer name, let's type in New Design and the device name to AlphaSphere. Now we want to make sure that all MIDI channels are selected, so make sure that they're all highlighted blue. Receive from, set that to AlphaSphere, and send to, set to AlphaSphere. You want to make sure that you tick this box so the MIDI channels are split, and if this is going to be your main MIDI instrument, you can tick this box as well. Once you've done that, click OK, click OK again, and now you've connected the AlphaSphere to Studio One. Next I'm going to show you how we go about adding 3 virtual instruments to Studio One and giving each one a different MIDI channel. So first we need to add 3 instrument tracks to the project. So to do this, we can go to Track and Add Instrument Track. So let's just do this a couple more times. So we've got 3 tracks. So now we have 3 instrument tracks in our project. Right, so next we need to apply virtual instruments to each of the 3 tracks. So to do this, first select a track, and then within the browser section here, select instruments, and you're given a long list of instruments that you can select from. So for track 1, let's just give it a keyboard sound. And to apply this to the track, just find an instrument you want and drag it onto the track. And now when you play pads on the AlphaSphere, it should trigger this instrument. Now if you remember back to part 1 of the tutorial, we set row 5 on the AlphaSphere to send modulation wheel data with the pad's pressure. And you can hear this in the sound as the pressure is modulating the sound with some vibrato. Next, let's apply virtual instruments to the other 2 tracks. So let's close this instrument. Let's find a pad sound for track 2. Drag that onto the track. That's a nice pad sound. Let's find a bass sound for track 3. So let's select track 3. So now we've applied 3 virtual instruments to the tracks. Next, we need to assign individual MIDI channels to each of the tracks. So if you go over to the left hand side where the tracks are listed, there's an option here to set the channel for each instrument. So track 1, channel 1, track 2, channel 2, and track 3, channel 3. Then let's record enable each of the tracks, so all these buttons are red, and now when you play the different pads on the AlphaSphere, it will trigger the different instruments. Finally, I'm going to give you an example of how we can map the MIDI CC pads from the AlphaSphere to control software parameters within Studio One. Right, to do this, we first need to select the mix button at the bottom right hand corner of the interface. So let's click that. And then if we go to the bottom left hand section and select the external tab from the new display. And then from the new display over here in the center, you need to double click the AlphaSphere item underneath the external devices. Now we need to assign some MIDI CC controls to Studio One. So the easiest way to do this is to click the MIDI Learn button here, and then just press the MIDI CC pads on the AlphaSphere. So I'm just going to individually press all 8 of the pads on the top row of the AlphaSphere. And as you can see, when I do that, it adds them to this display. And when I finished, just click the MIDI Learn button again. So the final thing we need to do is assign these 8 new controls to various software parameters around Studio One. So to do this, let's get rid of this window, and I'm going to bring up the editor for that synth sound. Now I want to assign one of the AlphaSphere MIDI CC pads to control this volume here. So to do that, first press the pad on the AlphaSphere that you want to use, then right click on the software parameter and click Assign Volume to the control on AlphaSphere. Select that, and then when you press the pad, it will automatically just start controlling that parameter. And you can do that for any of the 8 controls that we applied earlier. So for example, I'm going to press a different pad on the AlphaSphere, right click on this pan parameter, assign, and now I can control them with pads on the AlphaSphere. So that's how you use the AlphaSphere as a multi-channel MIDI instrument with Studio One. If you use any other DAWs, make sure you check out the other relevant videos and have a look at our other tutorial videos. Thanks for watching.